Paper Mario has a problem. It's not with the battle system, bosses, or platforming, it's actually with Toad Town. Toad Town is the hub for the entire game, granting you access to the different chapters as you progress. But it turns out you don't need. Surprisingly, there's a secret a lot of people don't know about in Toad Town, and they've just released a new product, the Beard Hedger. Whether you're trying to have to worry about storing a ton of attachments. Grooming can be uncomfortable if you're using a dull or worn-out razor, but the Beard Hedger has a 7200 RPM motor with a titanium-coated blade that cuts hair in a single stroke. So you don't have to worry about pulling and tugging on troublesome hairs, and it's even waterproof, so if you get it wet, no sweat. Go to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free promo code ABBASOFT at manscaped.com. And with that, let's get into the video. The game doesn't start in Toad Town. After being defeated by Bowser, you find yourself in Goomba Village, where one of your first objectives is getting the hammer. During this side quest, you will encounter Junior Troopa when you try to leave the hammer room, as the boss fight triggers when you hit the load zone. However, it is possible to skip this fight using a trick called load zone storage, which is an integral glitch to breaking Toad Town. So, let's break it down. When Mario enters a loading zone, the game begins a series of operations to prepare loading the next area. Under normal circumstances, you enter the load zone and the game loads the next area in memory, fades to black, then plays a small animation of Mario walking into the next area as everything fades back in. However, there's one condition that needs to be true for the sequence to take place. Mario needs to be on the ground before it will proceed beyond loading the next area in memory. If you jump into a loading zone, it won't start the sequence until you're grounded, and there's a single frame in the jump animation where you're able to jump again before the game recognizes you as being on the ground. If you jump into a loading zone, you can then chain together frame-perfect jumps to delay being taken to the next area. So why is this important? The loading zone for the hammer area is special. If you try to leave after getting the hammer, the game interrupts the load and instead plays a cutscene that leads to a battle with Junior Troopa. The trigger for this battle isn't present in the room initially. The game doesn't load it in until Mario picks up the hammer. So if you jump into the load zone, then chain together frame-perfect jumps, and then grab the hammer, the game will finish the first load you had stored and skip the battle sequence entirely. This was originally discovered by Bone Crusher in 2013 and saves about 2 minutes, but it's not the only special quality that the load zone storage glitch has. And after a quick boss battle with King Goomba, players start Chapter 1 and arrive at the most broken town in all of gaming. Toad Town isn't a static location. As you move through the game's chapters, more areas open up and new NPCs will appear. When you first arrive after the prologue, there are 2 obstacles you'll notice right away. A group of suspicious-looking toads blocking the path to the east, and some rubble blocking the path to the south. Chronologically, you're supposed to deal with the toads first, and to do this without glitches, you need to go to Shooting Star Summit, then talk to the suspicious toads, then enter Merlon's shop so he will dispel their disguises, which unblocks the eastern exit so you can make your way to the Koopa Bros fortress. Obviously, this takes a lot of time, about 6 minutes in a glitchless speedrun, as it involves a cutscene and a mini boss fight with Magikoopa. But fortunately, it can be skipped. The developers did a good job at shoring up the loading zone around the black toads, adding invisible walls so you can't jump over them. So if we can't go over, we'll just have to go under. In case you ever made it out of bounds and fell into the void, the developers included a feature to get you back on the ground so you didn't fall forever. Unlike most games that have a trigger volume that teleports you back in bounds, Paper Mario does something different. Instead of teleporting the player, it reverses Mario's gravity once he's been falling long enough. While you're falling or rising, you can make inputs on the stick to alter the direction Mario is currently moving. This lets you get to places you normally can't access, like loading zones that are blocked by NPCs. But there's still the issue of getting out of bounds in the first place. While speedrunners make getting out of bounds look like a cakewalk, it's not an easy task, and the main method they use is called NPC clipping. When Mario runs into a wall, the game puts a stop to his movement in that direction. But if he's against a wall and an NPC walks into him, the force of the NPC will make him clip through the wall. There is a setup involved, as being next to the wall and having an NPC walk into you isn't enough to trick the game into putting you out of bounds. First, you'll need to spin between the NPC and the wall while the NPC is walking. Then, you'll need to hammer just as you're starting to get pushed. The hammer animation is the key to this setup because while Mario is hammering, he ignores collisions with walls but retains the property of being pushed by NPCs. Now that we know the parts of the trick, let's put it all together. Once we are pushed through the wall near the signpost, it's possible to arrive back in bounds clipped inside of the post office wall. With some precise control stick maneuvers, you can fall out of bounds again, except this time, when you land back in bounds, you'll be on top of the invisible walls surrounding the Koopa Bros. Black Toads. Had the developers extended the invisible walls the entire way around the NPCs, this wouldn't be possible. Instead, they made them high enough that you couldn't jump on them from the sides and thought this would stop players from getting behind them. So to quote a famous gamer, once you're up there, you can just walk over it. Not only does this let us skip removing the Koopa Bros disguises, it lets us skip the Koopa Bros altogether, because it turns out speedrunners don't need to finish Chapter 1 to beat the game. All they need is to add Bombette to the party, so once they free her from the Koopa Bros fortress, they head back to Toad Town for another skip. The NPCs in town assure you that the debris left by Bowser will be cleaned up, but what they really mean is that you need to beat Chapter 1 before they'll move it out of the way, and since we're not beating Chapter 1, we'll find our own way around. Luckily for us, the badge shop is under construction until Chapter 1 is completed, and while it's being built, Ralph will walk back and forth to repair part of the shop when it falls over, right next to a wall, so you can probably see where this is going. Ralph will push Mario through the wall to get him on an area of grass you can't normally access, and because developers didn't intend for you to get here, there aren't any more walls to stop you from jumping into the void. Now, you're probably thinking, the logs are in southern Toad Town, so how is getting out of bounds in this area going to help us bypass them? And the answer is because load zone storage is even more broken than anyone could have imagined. If you look at a load zone, it doesn't just exist on the rectangle leading in and out of areas. It actually extends upwards and downwards for a very large distance. This means that while you're falling into the void, you can activate load zone storage by touching the trigger. Then, when you get pushed back in bounds, you'll load into South Toad Town. This would be the end of the story if it weren't for a glitch called skew. After you've started falling and have stored the loading zone, you'll need to hold some specific angles on the control stick. This is done for two reasons. First, you have a one-frame window when you land back in bounds to start falling again before the stored load will start, so it's important to stay out of bounds. And second, you want to get as far away from the loading zone as you can, which is where skew comes in. When Mario takes a loading zone normally, the game aims him at the center of the rectangle and has him walk towards it. But when you're very far away from the center of the rectangle, the game gives Mario a large amount of speed to try and get him to this point before the screen fades to black. In this situation, we've moved Mario so far away that the game can't get him there in time, so the game skews his location when it loads him into the next area, which in our case causes him to spawn in out of bounds, so we can use the upward gravity to get past the logs on our way back in bounds. This gets us into southern Toad Town before we're supposed to be, so let's have a look at what's here. It's made up of 4 different zones that contain the train to Chapter 2, the path to Chapter 3, the house to Chapter 4, passage to Chapter 5, and the Toad Town tunnels. Right now, all that's accessible to us is the train, which is why we needed Bombette. Then it's off to Chapter 2 to grab Parakarry, who's also required to beat the game before we double back to Toad Town. Because with all of these pathways to other chapters, it wouldn't make sense to do what the game wants us to. Coincidentally, we won't be going to any of the regular chapter start events. Chapters 3, 4, and 5 all require NPCs that initiate cutscenes to be present, and they don't spawn until the previous chapters have been completed. Instead, we're going to the Toad Town tunnels, but not through the currently available warp pipe. The Toad Town tunnels are a network of rooms below Toad Town that house badges, an item upgrade, and warp pipes to different chapters. The warp pipes serve as ways to quickly move from town to town, and they're locked behind abilities you receive in their respective chapters. For example, when you unlock Sushi in Chapter 5, you gain the ability to swim in water. the warp pipe for Chapter 5 is only accessible with Sushi, as you need to traverse the water and fight a boss to unlock it. However, at the end of this section is a pipe that leads back to Toad Town, and this is the entrance speedrunners will be using. This warp pipe entrance is located inside of the Blue House in southern Toad Town where the log skip took place. The door is locked from the inside, with the key being inside of the house itself. You're supposed to unlock it when you come through the tunnels after getting Sushi, but speedrunners found a way to get in from the outside without doing any of this. Unsurprisingly, the Blue House is made up of 3 different types of objects: a wall, a ceiling, and a floor. Each of these have different collision properties, but for some odd reason, the right wall is actually a floor. Floors calculate their collision differently than walls do. With a standing floor, it's actually possible to jump on its edge and remain in the air without being pushed back to the ground. With a precise setup, speedrunners found a way to jump onto the edge of the Blue House's right wall, which leaves getting inside. Ceilings also have unique collision. Unlike walls that push you from both sides, only the side that's facing the ground has collision properties active. So if you land on top of a ceiling, it doesn't try to keep you out, and Mario will fall through to the other side. Thanks to the developers using a floor as a wall and not double-siding the collision on a ceiling, it's possible to get into the Blue House without unlocking it. This gets us into the lower region of the Toad Town tunnels, but without Sushi, what exactly can we do? Fortunately, you only need Sushi if you're coming from the other side, so speedrunners just have to fight the blooper boss to spawn the warp pipe to Chapter 5, which lets them recruit Sushi while they're still technically in Chapter 1. This saves a bunch of time, as the normal method of getting to Chapter 5 involves a fight with Junior Troopa and a long cutscene as you get ferried across the ocean. And since the NPCs required don't spawn until Chapter 4 is completed, the Blue House skip is the only way for us to get to Chapter 5. Depending on what category you're running, there are a few things you can do once you arrive. If you're running any % no ace, you'll continue through Chapter 5 and then set up 2 Peach Warps, powerful glitches that let you end future chapters by re-triggering the end of Chapter 5. If you're running true any %, you'll do another skip to get into the volcano before you set up a glitch called Arbitrary Code Execution, or ACE. ACE is the most powerful glitch that can be performed in any game, as it allows players to alter the code of the game itself. And I like to imagine what an NPC would be thinking when Mario has literally gained the power to alter reality by jumping and hammering. ACE works by performing specific actions to alter the game's code, and the most common thing runners do when an ACE glitch is discovered is use it to warp to the end credits. But there have been other creative uses as well, like turning the Running Man from Ocarina of Time into a boss battle. And it's no surprise that Paper Mario and OOT can be used together to create a credits warp. Check out my other video if you want to hear that story. The glitches you can perform in Paper Mario vary from cutscene skips, to out of bounds, to rewriting the game's code itself. But the majority of glitches take place in what is most likely the most broken town in all of gaming. If you enjoyed the content, consider supporting me on Patreon, where you get access to uncensored versions of my video that YouTube would otherwise demonetize. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.